We are covering the structures of the brain. We are looking at a left side of the brain, but a mid-sagittal cut. I'm looking inside. I'm going to take a look at some of these structures with you. As I look at the numbers, I will name them, but you try to name them as well. Get in the habit of practicing the names of the structures. And then I'll show you the key, and then we'll go even further and look at some of the basic functions of some of these structures. I've been teaching anatomy for about 24 years now, and I try to simplify some of these subjects, especially when we get into the nervous system. There is a study guide for this, so if it helps you, click on that. But let's start by just identifying some of the lobes, and remember the lobes are very similar to the bone structures. So as I look at number 1, we're on the posterior side, so we know this area of the brain of the cerebrum is the occipital lobe. As I come up on the top, the majority of the brain, this lobe is parietal lobe, and as I come down to the frontal side, it's called the frontal lobe. What I can't see is the temporal lobe that's more visible on the lateral side. So I have frontal, parietal, and occipital. When I look at number 4, this is called the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum is that white matter. Remember, it's white because of the appearance of lipids from our myelin, and that's our connection of the two hemispheres. So all of number 4 is corpus callosum. Number 5, this is where I tend to say that it looks like a bird's head. So here's the bird's head. Number 5 is the thalamus. As I go below, hypo meaning below the thalamus, where it looks like a bird's beak, this is hypothalamus. So 5 thalamus, 6 is hypothalamus. As I come down, number 7 is cerebral peduncles. This is part of the midbrain. Behind it, you may see the term tegmentum, but I refer to this general area as cerebral peduncles. On the other side, you also see number 9, corpora quadrigemina, also known as the tectum, is actually 4 structures in one. Because I can see 2 sides, the top is called the superior colliculus, the bottom is called inferior colliculus, but there's 4 sections of this, 2 superior colliculi on top, 2 inferior colliculi on bottom. Number 8 is the pineal gland. Number 8 is pineal gland. And then as I come down to 10 is all of the cerebellum. And then within it, I have this white structure called the Arbor Vitae. Arbor Vitae means tree of life. As I come over here, number 11 is called the Pons. And then as I drop down to this last part of the brainstem, this is the medulla or medulla oblongata. So let's look at our key here. How did you do? We said our lobes, and I'll go through this quickly. Occipital lobe, parietal lobe, frontal lobe. 4 is corpus callosum. Number 5, thalamus. As I drop down below it, hypothalamus. We said 7 was cerebral peduncles. 8, pineal gland. 9 is corpora quadrigemina, but remember I can break those down to superior colliculus, and 9 is inferior colliculus. Number 10 is the cerebellum with that white tree inside called Arbor Vitae. Number 11, Pons. And then 12 is medulla oblongata. I also forgot to mention pituitary gland, one of our master glands. So pituitary glands does a lot of hormonal control. So now let's look at the functions of them. Basic functions. Let's look at the occipital lobe. When we look at the cortex, the occipital lobe, primarily for understanding, interpretation, vision. Parietal lobe does a lot of general sensory. So we say general sensory, like the perception of touch is the same here as it is here. So general sensory, but it handles some of our tastes. When we talk about temperature, hot, cold can feel the same in different spots, but general sensory for the parietal lobe. Frontal lobe does general motor control. So our motor control as I move and that decision making to make that motor function. We also look at the frontal lobe as it generates that higher order thought, meaning that more logical thinking that occurs. We tend to say males take about till they're 25 years old before we finally mature in this area to allow for that maturity of the brain. So some of our higher thought. Corpus callosum, remember we said that white matter allows for communication between the 2 cerebral hemispheres, the 2 sides of the brain. The thalamus is our sensory relay station. How do we process sensory information? When you move information across to different lobes, it tends to go through the thalamus because it's the relay station to end up at whatever cortex of each lobe, for example, occipital lobe for visual information. The hypothalamus, below the thalamus, controls our autonomic nervous system. Remember, autonomic nervous system is our visceral motor, our sympathetic and parasympathetic, which is our fight or flight and our rest and repose. So this is our survival mechanism. The hypothalamus also regulates some of our temperature, some of our sleep, hunger, and thirst. Cerebral peduncles. The ped is referring to feet. There's tracts, meaning that tracts are bundles of axons to relay information up and down the brainstem from the spinal cord up to the brain. When we look at some of our other structures, the pineal gland secretes a hormone called melatonin, which regulates our circadian cycle or our sleep-awake cycle when we need to go to sleep. And some people will take a supplement of melatonin to regulate their own sleep pattern. So pineal gland for sleep. Remember, corpora quadrigemina has our 2 superior colliculus on top and 2 inferior colliculus on bottom. It handles a couple things. One, when you go to the doctor, it's tracking your eyes. That's that visual reflex of being able to track something. So if you feel like you're watching for survival, you're hunting, that's your visual reflex. Your auditory reflex is that startle of a sound. So when something happens, what was that? What was that? That's the sensation of trying to interpret what was that startle reflex. Again, back to survival, understanding large sounds. The cerebellum helps a lot with just how I'm sitting here right now, maintaining some of my motor control, some of my motor movements, ability to understand where I'm at in space in conjunction with a couple other structures, but the cerebellum helps with that general coordination of my posture and be able to sit here and balance my body. The pons helps with some of our breathing, inhalation, exhalation, but it's another connection as we're going up and down through the brainstem. Medulla oblongata, I always feel like handles some of our crazy stuff. So it handles like our sneezing, our hippic. So it handles some of our sneezing, our vomiting, our hiccuping, our swallowing, our coughing, the crazy stuff that all our body does. And then we'll look at some of our breathing as well in conjunction with the pons. Pituitary gland, we often call the master gland. There's a lot of hormones that are going through this gland and creating a cascade effect through the body. A lot to do with growth and reproduction. As you learn the structures, it's important to also understand the functions as you build the language of understanding the nervous system. These are brain functions along with their structures.